I'm Erin Hisey, and this is Masterclass Monday. Sorry, I just really wanted to do that. Anyway, I'm Erin Hisey, and I am here to talk to you about what a lighting designer is and what they do. So first, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Tuscaloosa. I got into theater because it was sort of a family business. My grandmother on my dad's side wrote, directed, produced, and starred in her first play at the age of 6, and then went on to become an English and drama teacher in Tuscaloosa. Some of you may have had class with her if you're older. And then, of course, my father, John Hisey, who got his MFA in lighting design under John Ross at the University of Alabama. Mom says that him getting his MFA in lighting at Alabama is the reason that I turned out the way that I have. It turns out when she was pregnant with me, he was working on his thesis production of King Lear, and they were using the sounds of hogs being slaughtered as one of the sound effects. So while she was pregnant with me in the later months, he was playing the sound of hogs being slaughtered over and over again for a show. And she is convinced that that's how I ended up the way that I am. But you'd have to take that up with her. So I kind of grew up in Theatre Tuscaloosa, literally grew up working with Theatre Tuscaloosa. I kind of grew up with Theatre Tuscaloosa itself. When I was little, it was still Tuscaloosa Community Players. And as I grew up and became a theater professional myself, it grew up and became Theatre Tuscaloosa. I used to actually have a sleeping bag in the dimmer room at the Bama. I spent my evenings not sitting at home watching TV or playing with my friends, but I would come with Dad to the theater while he worked on shows. I actually got in trouble in kindergarten when I was about 5. Dad was working on Theatre Tuscaloosa's production of Chicago, and I was walking around to kindergarten singing the songs from Chicago, and my kindergarten teachers were not big fans of that. They found that it was inappropriate. I used to spend a lot of time at the theater with him during shows as well. When I was about 5 or 6, my job was to sit in front of the spotlight and hand drinks up to the people running the spotlights behind me. The big old super troopers they used to have up in the balcony. And age 8 was the first time I ran the lighting consoles for a Theatre Tuscaloosa production. When I was 13 was the first time I was an assistant stage manager for Little Shop of Horrors with Theatre Tuscaloosa. And then at the age of 14, I ended up being the stage manager for our production of Gypsy. I was originally an ASM, but when we got to Tech Week, there were some interesting things that happened, and I ended up having to call the show. I did try when I was little acting. Turns out I'm a really horrible actor. I'm the little kid that stands on the stage and doesn't talk and just looks at all the pretty lights that are shining on around them. I still do that. So I've done pretty much any crew job, backstage job, designer job, whatever you can come up with, pretty much I have done it at some point, with the exception of directing. I have never actually directed a show. I've helped a lot with directing shows, but I've never actually directed one. And my very first professional paid show was, in fact, lighting design for Man of La Mancha at Theatre Tuscaloosa. So I knew that I wanted to be in theater at a young age. So I actually went to high school in Birmingham at the Alabama School of Fine Arts. I did my undergrad degree. I have a BFA in technical production from New York University, along with some super handy, actually, minors in linguistics and classics. I then started my master's degree at UCLA and decided that that program wasn't for me. So I switched to the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, which was a fantastic decision that I do not regret at all. And while I was there, I got my MFA in scenography, which means that I'm actually trained in scenic lighting and costume design, but lighting is sort of my first love, what I super enjoy doing. So they asked me to tell you guys about who or what inspires me and who my mentors have been. And my mentors are all connected to Theatre Tuscaloosa, really. The first one's my dad, right? I grew up working with him, and I learned so much just from being in the theater growing up. And then there's Paul Looney, who I'm sure probably everyone watching this knows, who's basically like another dad to me. Susan's like another mom. And then we have Charlie Dennis, who some of you may or may not know. If you're newer, you don't know him. But he was a longtime designer and technical director for Theatre Tuscaloosa. And once again was like another parent to me. And then, of course, there was John Ross, who was the lighting design professor at UA forever, and as actually the person that taught my dad while he was getting his master's. Funny story, when I did my very first professional show, Man of La Mancha at Theatre Tuscaloosa, 3 of those guys were on the show. Paul was the director, Charlie was the technical director, and John Ross was the lighting designer. So the only one that wasn't there with me was my dad. But he, of course, stopped by. If you've ever done a Theatre Tuscaloosa show that I've designed or he's designed, you've seen both of us around. My inspirations, my biggest inspiration, honestly, is my students. I never thought that I would go into educational theater. When I was in school myself, I had zero intentions of teaching, but it turns out I love it. I really, really love it. And my students tend to be my greatest source of inspiration because they look at things in new and different ways that I haven't thought of. And they're always so excited about everything that it makes me more excited about things that maybe I've dismissed or haven't really thought about. And the other thing is just the world around me. A lot of my classes, I encourage my students to get research and inspiration just from what's happening around them in the world. Life is about people and theater is about people. So honestly, just the world around me is where I get most of my inspiration. What I'm doing right now, I am currently the assistant professor of theater in lighting and scenic design at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is why I'm dressed in something super warm. It's actually pretty cold up here already, even though I know it's still hot down there in Alabama. So I design the scenery and lighting for most of our shows, unless we have a student designer or we occasionally bring in a guest designer. And then, of course, I teach all of the lighting and scenic design classes, lighting and sound practicum classes. I teach a sound recording class with a sound engineer that we have up here. And I also teach introduction to design as well as a period style sort of design history class. And of course, I still do freelance design work. Designing is my first love. So I still do that pretty much wherever anyone is willing to hire me. So I'm gonna move on now and just tell you a little bit about actual lighting design. So now let's talk about what does a lighting designer do? And in order to do that, we have to talk a little bit about how lights work. So let's start with this first basic fact. Without lights, it's just radio. Light is what allows our eyeballs to see things. If we don't have light, we don't see. So lighting is an incredibly important part of a theatrical design. So we need lights. So lighting is actually one of the first theatrical design types out there. Now, if you take a design class or you talk to most people, they're going to tell you that lighting design is actually one of the last types of design there was out there for the theater. I don't believe this. I believe that they are conflating the discovery of electricity and the invention of the light bulb with the beginnings of lighting design, and that's just not true. Way back thousands of years ago, when we're looking at the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, ancient African cultures, before we got to formal theater, when what we were seeing was the very beginnings of drama found in religious ceremonies, those people made very conscious decisions when and where to place their dramas that they were producing for maximum effect. And part of that effect came from the lights, whether they chose to use the sun or fire or oil lamps. These were conscious decisions that they made about the lighting because of how lighting affects us as human beings and as individuals. Look at the Middle Ages, right? When there supposedly wasn't lighting design yet. The Corpus Christi plays that told the story of man in the world from the very creation, when God said, "Let there be light," to the very end of the world. They would start those plays at sunrise, when God would say, "Let there be light." They would run them through the day, and they would end with the sunset and the end of the world. Again, these were very conscious lighting decisions that were made. Maybe there wasn't someone specifically referred to as a lighting designer, but these decisions were still being made. So let's talk about the primary concerns of light. The first one is visibility, right? What's happening on stage? The audience needs to be able to see it. The secondary concerns for lighting are going to be furthering the storyline, setting your mood and atmosphere, manipulating audience focus, and controlling sort of the overall stage composition. what the audience sees when they look at the stage during your production. So there's two basic types of lighting. We have motivational and we have non-motivational. So motivational lighting is theatrical lighting based on reality, right? It's lighting designed to recreate realistic lighting on stage, lights that look like you see in your everyday life. In this production, for instance, which is a production of Waiting for Godot, where I did the scenery and the lighting, I was very concerned with the passage of time and showing time of day. And this is a scene from the very beginning of the show. It's early morning. You can tell it's really directional. You can see light coming from here, like the sun is starting to rise. And as we go through the show, the light will slowly go up and over and then down as the sun goes down from this direction. Realistic lighting. Then we have non-motivational lighting. So non-motivational lighting is lighting as a pure element of design. And that means it's usually based on emotional or thematic content. We're either using the lighting to manipulate the audience's feelings or to help reinforce the theme of the show. So this was from a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, where I did the set and the lighting. And if you look at this, you can see there was absolutely nothing realistic about any of this lighting. This is not lighting you would see in your everyday life at all. It was purely an element of design. It was a fairy world. I just wanted to make it bright and colorful, right? So completely non-motivational. Most lighting designs nowadays are going to be a mix, all right? They're going to utilize a mix of both types, motivational and non-motivational. So this is a picture from Theatre Tuscaloosa's Ragtime that I did the lighting for. And while it's kind of got a realistic look to it, you can see everyone, it's got those string lights, the signs are lit up. At the same time, you have this one person who's obviously in some form of a spotlight, while these folks were in interesting shadows. Right, there's the projections going on behind them. So it's really a mix of motivational and non-motivational lighting, which is what you'll see most of the time nowadays. So let's talk a little bit about stage lighting, how it works, and how the lighting instruments we use to do stage lighting work. So let's talk about the functions of stage lighting first. So there's 5 of these, and the first is selective visibility. Selective visibility is just the audience only sees what's lit. That's it. That's all they can see is what you choose for them to see, right? So selective visibility just establishes audience focus by leading the eye to a particular place, which is usually the brightest point on the stage, right? So these are 2 pictures from Theatre Tuscaloosa's production of The Producers. And the setting for both of these pictures is identical. But as a lighting designer, I simply directed your focus to what was most important at the time, right? So in this first picture, it was the theater's ushers who were more important. And in the second picture, what we really needed the audience to look at was the fact that it was opening night at the Schubert Theater for Funny Boy by Max Bialystock. Next up is the revelation of form, right? Revelation of form. Light is what makes objects, including actors, right, appear either two-dimensional or three-dimensional. It makes them appear either flat or to have texture and vitality to them. So these are a couple more pictures from Ragtime. And if you look at this first one, these people who are standing on the bridge and under the bridge, those could be actors. They could also just as easily be some kind of cutout, some flat paper silhouette cutout that we've placed up there. However, when you change the lighting, right, you can see that we have actual 3-dimensional people standing there, right? And it's the light that changes them from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. Let's look at composition, right? So since selective visibility determines what the audience sees, the lighting controls the overall stage composition or what the audience sees of the scenery, the costume, and the actors. So these 2 shots from The Producers are both in Max Bialystock's office. It's the exact same set. It's even the same scene. But the lighting designer is taking control of how we see that scene and what we see in that scene. In this first picture, right, our focus is on Uma coming through the door. She is what's important about this, and that's what we focused on. Over here, right, it's the same set, the same scene, but we wanted you to see the whole office, right? To be able to see everything that was happening in the composition of the stage.
So let's talk about establishing mood, right? So light and its color, its direction, and its intensity have a direct correlation to human emotions, right? Have you ever been out with people in the middle of the night? You're somewhere dark, it's calm, it's peaceful, and you tell them a secret that you never thought you would ever tell anyone in your entire life. Something that you would never tell people sitting outside in the sunlight at noon on a Tuesday. Okay? It's a little secret for you in life. Put people in a dark room, they'll tell you anything you want to know. I've always been interested in the fact that movies show interrogations of people having a bright light shined on their face, because in my experience, and in most people's experience, the darker the room, the more secrets you're going to get out of people. But lighting, and especially the color of lighting and the angle of lighting, is a great way to affect people's mood and change how they feel, whether you're in the theater or out of it. The last function of stage lighting is reinforcing theme. So reinforcing theme is not something that's obvious in design, whether it's scenery, lighting, or costumes. I've never seen an audience member walk out of the show going, you know, I got the theme of that show was good versus evil, and I got it all from the lighting. I've never heard that happen, and I doubt I ever will. Right? So it's not that you can look at the design and it tells you the theme, so much as it just supports it, it reinforces it. Right? So this is a picture from Fiddler on the Roof, and they're singing the song that's about traditions. And sort of the whole point of this thing is that life is fragile, right? Just like someone playing a fiddle on a roof, it's fragile. Our traditions are fragile. Our way of life is fragile. Our very lives themselves are fragile. Just like a fiddler playing on the roof at any moment could slip and fall, right? So I wanted there to be this constant presence of the fiddler behind us, and a great way to show that was sort of this silhouette, while in the meantime we're focusing on the happiness of these people living their lives and enjoying their traditions, and just not thinking about the fact that those traditions are so fragile. So those are sort of the functions of stage lighting. So we have to be able to utilize those functions, and we do that by utilizing the controllable properties of light. So we're going to talk about that next. So there's 4 controllable properties of light. These are going to be intensity, distribution, color, and movement. So we're going to start by talking about intensity. So the intensity of a light is the brightness or the dimness of it. How bright or dark is this light? Right, so here's a couple of pictures from Bye Bye Birdie of the same scenery and the same actors, and you can tell how different sort of the mood and the feel of the stage picture is depending on how bright or how darkly it was lit. You can also see how it changes our focus. So next up is distribution. So distribution is sort of a combination of things, right? It combines the direction from which a beam of light is traveling to hit an object and the softness of the edges of that beam of light, what we call the quality of it. So we're talking about the quality of the edge of a beam of light. We're talking about these 2 pictures right here. It can be a really sharp, well-defined edge to the light, or it can be this sort of soft, hazy, undefined light that just sort of filters off into nothingness. When we're talking about direction, we're talking about what direction is the light coming from before it strikes an actor or an object on the stage. So over here we have Jeff Wilson in Amadeus demonstrating several of the different directions of light for us, right? And you can see how dramatically different it sort of changes the mood and the feel of the picture depending on where the light is coming from as it hits Jeff in these pictures. Next up is my favorite property of light, which is color. Color is so amazing, right? Light can reveal color or it can alter color, all right? If you use white light, like this picture down here, right? It just shows you the intrinsic colors of objects. Like if you look at these 2 pictures, the white light just shows you the colors of this person's hand. But light doesn't just come in white. Light comes in all different colors, and we utilize those colors in stage lighting, right? All these different mixes of colors that we can get. And when you shine a colored light on a colored item, it changes its color, right? Look at the difference between this hand under a red light and this hand under a white light, and how it changes the intrinsic color of the person's hand, right? And something doesn't just have to be a bold color for it to be changed by colored light. These are all the exact same piece of black fabric. They're just shown under different colors of light. Right? So you can see how the different colors affect everything, including white or black. So here's some more pictures from the producers in Act 2, where you can kind of get such a different feel. We go from this sort of plain office feel to this very romantic moment, all right, between our two lead characters. And then this really romantic sort of post-coital picture of them in the hot pink. So color has such a huge effect on how we see and how we view the world, and it makes it incredibly important to lighting. If you've ever watched shows that I've designed at Theatre Tuscaloosa, which if you've seen a show at Theatre Tuscaloosa in the last few decades, you've probably seen a show that I've lit, you'll notice that my shows tend to feature a lot of color. Some designers love color, some designers don't. I love color. And it's one of sort of the defining features of my design work is my use of color and how much of it I can put into a single show. So our last controllable property of light is movement, all right? So movement can happen in a couple of ways. You can see the physical movement of a light, where the light is actually moved around. Now that may be somebody carrying a flashlight, it may be a moving light like you might see at a concert where the light itself actually does move around the stage. Or maybe what we call cue movement. Cue movement is a change to one of the other controllable properties of light, like intensity or distribution or color, right? So what you see here in this lovely picture of Christmas lights, right, would be what we would call cue movement, right? So it's changing the intensity of the lights. They're getting brighter, they're getting dimmer, they're turning on, they're turning off. That's a movement. If they were changing colors from red to blue to green or so on, that would also be a change in movement, right? If it was changing in angle, or if the edges of the lights were changing from softer to harder, sharper to more diffuse, that would also be a change in a property of the light that we would refer to as movement. So as a lighting designer, I have all of these tools at my disposal to create my lighting design. So now I'm just going to run you through the lighting design process really quick. I'm not going to get into too much detail because they told me I needed to keep the video pretty short and I could talk about this for hours, but I'm going to go ahead and just run you through the process. So it kind of happens in 3 sections, and the first one is getting hired, right? Get hired to do a show, you get the script, and then you're going to read that script. You're going to read it again and again and again and again and again until you know it backwards and forwards. I usually read a script the first time just to sort of get the story like I would reading a book, right? And to see what the audience is going to kind of picture when they hear it for the first time. And then I read it to get ideas about what the playwrights told me I need, what the stage direction notes in it tell me I need, and anything else that I just sort of read into it or that comes up in my mind, right? So I'm going to come up with these ideas for sort of the look and feel of the lighting, but it's going to be in really abstract terms because I haven't talked to my director yet. I don't know what the sets or costumes are going to look like or any of that. So next, I'm going to meet with the director and the rest of the artistic team. Now, there are a lot of theaters out there who like to bring their lighting designers in towards the end of the process when the scenery and the costumes have already been designed. I personally prefer to come in earlier in the process. For one thing, theater is a collaborative art, and I think it's helpful when the entire artistic team is there from inception to the finished production. And it can also keep you from running into problems that a lighting designer may notice earlier in the process, and keep them from having to be fixed at the end when it's much harder to fix them. So the artistic team is going to get together and they're going to talk about the show and the goals of this particular production of this script. And of course, we're going to have to think about those little practical details like the budget, how much money do we have, the time, how long do we have to put this together, what size and type of venue do we have, is it a black box, is it a proscenium stage, a thrust stage, an arena stage, and then people. How many people do we have to work on this? Are they volunteers? Are they professionals? Are they students? How much do they know about the process? Then we're going to find out the director's intentions and concept for the production. Most directors will come in with an idea for a show kind of ready to go, and they'll share it with you. Sometimes they want the team to come up with it as a whole, so they won't come in with a lot of parameters. But it is important for a director to give a designer some parameters. Having no parameters, having just the sky be the limit for designer is actually really hard, because then you have so many options that you just can't pick the one to stick with. So you need some of those parameters from your director. So then you're all going to collaborate as a team, and you're going to start formulating the designs mostly for scenery and costumes to begin. Now, the actual concrete ideas for lighting are going to come in a little later, once the lighting designer knows what the set and costumes look like. But they will participate in those beginning decisions for scenery and costumes. And every time the scenic or costume designer has an idea, it's going to set off ideas in the lighting designer as well. They're going to want to put their 2 cents in, so that everyone can collaborate again, because it's a collaborative art. So the lighting designer is going to go ahead and start looking for research and inspiration for the lighting, mostly focusing at this point on the overall production concept and the themes and the emotional content of the script, because they don't really know what they're designing for yet. What the blocking looks like, what the scenery and the costumes look like, right? Those are things that can be done before the director starts working with the cast on things like blocking, where the actors go on the stage. But those things are really important to the lighting designer. They have to know them to be able to do their job. So once the set and the costumes are mostly finalized, all right, the lighting designer is going to start turning those initial ideas into some really concrete choices about the show's lighting and how they want to light it. So they're going to make those choices a reality by putting the design down on paper. So what they're going to do first is create a light plot. So the light plot is a big piece of drafting, an architectural drawing of the theater showing all of the different hanging positions where you can place lights, like catwalks and coves and electrics, and box booms and trees, all these places that you can hang or place lights. And it's also going to show the scenery for the production so that the lighting designer knows where everything is. And that light plot is going to show each and every individual light that the lighting designer is going to hang for that production. For most Theatre Tuscaloosa productions, I hang somewhere between 150 to 250 lights, depending on the size of the production, its scale, how long it is it a musical, is it a straight play, just based on complexity of the show itself, how many lights I'm going to need. So this drafted light plot is going to show every single one of those lights, what type of light it is, what color that light is, where it's going to get its power and its data so it can turn on and be controlled by the light board, any accessories it needs like patterns or an iris or a rotator, whatever it might need, and then how it's going to be controlled through the light board. So you're also going to have some paperwork. Your plot is kind of usually a giant drawing that may be up to like 3 feet by 4 feet wide at times, right? That's a lot to carry around. So we're also going to do paperwork that's going to include items like a channel hookup and an instrument schedule that have the same information as what's on the light plot, but it's in a spreadsheet form, so it's easier to carry around and it's easier to find your information quickly. And these different types of paperwork are going to organize the information in different ways, depending on what's important. For instance, a channel hookup organizes everything by its channel, right? So maybe all of my light that comes from the front of the stage for Act 1 is in my first 15 channels, and all of the light that comes from the front for Act 2 is in the second 15 channels, right? It's going to give me those things in that type of an order. An instrument schedule is going to give me that information by lighting position. So it's going to tell me about all the lights on the first electric, and then all the lights on the second electric, and then all the lights on the third electric, and then maybe all the lights hanging on scenery, and then all the lights in the box boom stage left, all the box boom lights stage right, and so on, right? And then there's one very special piece of paperwork that is called a magic sheet. And a magic sheet is a piece of paper that combines all of that information once again, hopefully on one single small 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that the designer will have when they sit down to write cues, right? Because again, when you sit down at the light board to write your cues, you don't want all these huge giant pieces of paperwork. You want something very small and specific and to the point with your information. So once all the light plot is done and all this paperwork is ready, which usually takes a couple weeks to get all of this put together, then it's time to move into the theater. Once we get in the theater, we can hang our lights, we can focus our lights, and we can write our cues for the show. So to hang the lights, we have to hang each individual one of those lights in its intended location. We have to run cables to it and plug it in for power. For data, right? Data is how it gets its information from the lighting console to the light about when to turn on, when to turn off, when to change color, how fast or slow to do that. Make sure it has its color, whether it's LED color that's inside the light already or if we're going to add gel to it. And then, like I said, any accessories. So you have to think about, we've got to do that for anywhere from 150 lights to 250 lights at Theatre Tuscaloosa shows. A lot of Broadway shows out there may have up to 1,000 or more lights. That this has to be done for each and every instrument. Once all of that's done, you're ready to focus the lights, right? Which is just pointing the lights where they need to go on stage. So an electrician is going to go to each and every individual light, and under the direction of the lighting designer who's standing on the stage yelling all this information to them, they're going to point it in the correct direction. They're going to manipulate the size and shape of the beam to the designer's specifications. And again, this has to be done for every single light. For most shows, hang, it takes anywhere from a few hours to a couple of days. Focus the same way, anywhere from a few hours to a couple of days. At Theatre Tuscaloosa, we usually finish the process for hang and focus in 4 or 5 days. I've worked places where it was a little faster, places where it was a little slower. There's so many things to go into how much that time is that you need to do these things. Once the lights have been hung and focused, right, we're ready to write cues for the show. So the designer is going to sit down at the light board. They may have someone to help them that would be a programmer that would actually type everything into the board, but they may not. As a lighting designer, I prefer to do my programming myself. I'm actually a pretty fast programmer, and while I'm actually programming the board, helps me sort of solidify the ideas for the cues in my head as I go through the show. So the designer is going to sit at the console with their script, probably a video of a run through of a rehearsal. So if they missed a blocking note or anything, they have it so they can see it and they can get timing right for things like songs, when scenes start and end. And of course, they're going to have their script that has all of these cues written into it as well. So each cue is going to tell particular lights when to come on or go off, how bright they should be, maybe what color they need to be, and at what speed they're going to make these changes. Every time the lights change in a show, that's a cue. Now, for your average straight play at Theatre Tuscaloosa, I usually have between 100 and 150 cues. And for musicals, I usually tend to be somewhere between 200 to 300 cues. So this can take me anywhere from 4 or 5 hours to do up to 12 or 13 hours to do. It just depends, again, on the complexity of the show, how many lights I've used, how many cues there are. Once I've finished all that and it's in the light board, then we're ready for our technical rehearsals. So before these technical rehearsals are going to start, right, the designer is going to meet with the director and the stage manager, and they're going to tell the stage manager where in the script each cue happens. The lighting designer isn't in the booth running the light board when we're having technical rehearsals or having performances. It's the stage manager and a crew member that's the lighting console or light board operator. So the stage manager, every time they see one of these cues written into their script, is going to tell that light board operator to push the go button and a cue will happen. And that's how they're run during rehearsals and performances. So during these technical rehearsals, the designer is going to take notes while they watch the lighting happen as the stage manager and the light board op run it. They're also going to receive notes from the director as well. And after rehearsals each day, they're going to do these notes and improve the show. So notes may include things that involve the electricians, like adding lights or moving lights, maybe changing the color or changing the focus. It's not quite pointed at the right place. Or it may be making changes to the cue programming in the board. So by the time technical and dress rehearsals are finished, the lighting designer's job is done at that point. Right? At that point, the lights for the show are up to the stage manager and the lighting board operator to make sure that the lights run really smoothly as intended, and the designer is going to move on to their next show. So there you have sort of the quick and dirty breakdown of what we do, how these lights work that we use to do these things, how we can use them and how they contribute to the show. And I hope you've learned a little something. I'm going to talk to you a little bit next about what to expect as an audience when you look at lighting and some things you might want to think about if you're thinking about becoming a lighting designer yourself.
Okay, so I'm back again. All right, so some other things they wanted me to talk to everybody about, so I just thought I'd spend a couple of minutes here at the end, is what advice would I give someone who's thinking about going into lighting design? And my first piece of advice is to just go see theater. Go see lighting design, figure out what you like, start figuring out how it works, right? Start studying light and paying attention to it, and pay attention to how people react to it, how light changes, how they act, how they feel, what they do, and think about it with yourself as well, right? When you're in a bad mood, what helps cheer you up? Does something help you calm down at night, right? Does having a darker room help you sleep, right? Are those little things that figure out how light affects you and affects other people. Spend more time looking up. That's just good advice for life in general. Most people don't spend a lot of time looking up. So if you ever need to hide anything from potential burglars, always aim high, because people never look up, right? But most light comes from above us. So keep an eye out, see what you can see. Keep up with emerging technologies. It moves so fast, especially in lighting. Literally every few months, there are new lighting products coming out, new technology. It changes constantly all the time. A great thing to do is to learn about projections. Projections, especially over the last few years, have become this really big deal in theater. It's a huge booming business, and projection designers are always needed. And a lot of times they'll look to the lighting designer to do projection work. And last, I would say volunteer at a theater. Find a local theater, a community theater that needs help, because they all need help. And do the grunt work, right? Doing the little grunt work, taping cables, helping hang, helping focus. You're going to learn so much about how the equipment works, what the technology is, and how it gets used. You're going to learn so much more than you might ever think you would. And last, they wanted me to talk about what an audience member should look for to know if it's an effective lighting design. And I would say one of the most important things is not noticing the lighting. 9 times out of 10, lighting is most successful if the audience wasn't paying attention to it. You'll find that when you read theater reviews, the thing you see talked about the least is usually lighting. Usually if lighting is mentioned in a theatrical review in a paper or a magazine or on a TV show, it's bad. They noticed it because it was problematic. Now, that's not to say that there aren't shows that have really flashy, interesting lighting that you're going to notice it a lot. But in your average show, it's usually most successful when you don't notice it. The thing to do is just pay a little more attention to it. Hopefully after watching this video, you understand a little bit more about all the work and the decision making and time and effort that goes into creating that lighting design that lets you see what's happening on the stage. And just watch it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. And for everyone down at Theatre Tuscaloosa and in Tuscaloosa, I hope I see everybody soon. If nothing else, I'll be back next summer for Mamma Mia, and I hope to see all of you guys then.